Hello, this is the S3QL demo video. If you've come to this video, you probably already know that S3QL is a domain-specific language to operate entities of the S3DB core model. S3QL specifically will enable you to do read-write operations on S3DB entities. So to start off, I'm at the site for S3DB, and that is s3db.org. And the documentation for S3QL can be found in this site under documentation. So if you go to the documentation, there are several documents that you can browse. I'll start with the syntax for S3QL. So if you just click on there, you'll see the various options that you have to performing S3QL operations. Before we do that, let me just give you an example of why S3QL is useful. So let's go to the demo page. You can go there directly through the S3DB website. And let's go ahead and log in using the guest username and password. So that will be just guest and guest. Login. If you see here, there is a tab that says keys. If you click there, there are already 2 keys available, but I'll just create a new key just to show you how easy it is to create one. You just, by default it expires in 24 hours, but you can add the expiration date for how long you want it to be. So we just create the key. Now I'm just going to copy the key into my clipboard, just so that I know I don't have to memorize it. Now I'll just show you here what's under the projects tab. So a project is an S3DB entity, and here you can see that there are several projects under this account. For example, we can open one of these projects, for example the protein interaction database, and inside that project you'll find types of entities. So interaction and protein in this case are entities of type collection. If you click on it, we can see the properties that that elements will have, and we can also list all the existing instances of that collection. So you can see that are already some pieces of data inserted here. So now let's log out, and using this just the URL, we don't need anything else. Let's just type after the URL for the S3DB deployment. If you type s3ql.php without nothing else, it's going to give you the default projects that are publicly available. So if we just go back to the s3db.org, just so that we can follow the procedure, the documentation as we go along writing S3QL queries. So let's go to the S3QL syntax. So to write S3QL queries, you're going to need a few parameters. S3QL is written with an XML syntax, although there is also a more compact version. I'll show you that after the more verbose XML version. So in order to perform a query that we just saw, so the default query that it's here, we're going to have to ask for a select operation, and as the target of the select operation, we're going to ask for the projects. So if you just look at the structure of this query, you can see that it's a very simple query. All you have to do is go back to your S3QL, to the S3DB deployment, and just start typing REST arguments. So the first argument that I'm going to put here is the key. The key will let me authenticate as the guest user rather than the public user, which is the one that is being authenticated right now. I now add the query argument, and I start typing my query. So if we go back to here, you can see that every S3QL query starts with the S3QL tag. So if I type S3QL and then close it so I don't forget to close it, and now I type the operation that I want to perform. So in this case it's a select operation, and now just like in SQL, you can either put an asterisk here or you can specify a property. Now, since I want to be lazy with this query, I'll just put the asterisk, and whatever comes out, comes out. I'm going to specify the target, so I'm going to ask for all my projects. And I'm just going to leave it at that. This will basically give me the same list that I had when I entered the interface. So you can see that one of the attributes of each one of these projects is the ID of the project. If I wanted to now perform a query of the collections that exist inside that project, I would just have to, let me, for example, choose a project, the same one that we were watching earlier, so with the protein interaction database, and then I go back to the query and I change the target of the query from projects to collections. Now I need to specify a parameter. Now the parameter is going to be the project ID that I want to query. So in order to add a parameter, let me show you first on the example, I just specify a portion of the XML where I'm going to have, it's going to be inside the where tag. So I have to specify the where tag, and then all the parameters that I want to select will be inside that tag. So again, I choose where, close it, project ID, and then I copied it to my clipboard earlier, project ID, and press enter, and this will give me all the collections that are inside the S3DB projects that I selected. Now if I open Firebug, we may be able to see the time that it takes for the query to execute. So I'll press enter again to show you how much time it takes. So the time that the query is taking approximately 533 milliseconds to perform. Of course, this is Verbal's way to write the query, and you're probably not going to want to do this through the browser. So let me show you how you can do the same thing using a computational statistics platform like MATLAB, for example. So for MATLAB, it's as simple as doing something called URL read, which is essentially the function that performs the calling of a HTML document. Now, you'll see that when I perform the query, it's showing me the data in a nice tabular format. This is for convenient reasons because it's being displayed on the browser. But I can also add an alternative format representation that will be more appropriate for certain cases. So for example, if I want JSON instead, all I have to do is add a REST argument that says that the format should be JSON. Okay, and the data of the query comes formatted as a JSON string. But for now, let's use the HTML, which is a default, or I can specify that the format is HTML. Again, for a complete listing of all the formats, you can go here to the s3db.org page, and there is a documentation page specifying the available formats for S3QL. So this is the formats that are supported so far. So there are 3 types of RDF that you can export your data as, JSON, and among others. So going back to MATLAB, the reason why the query string is already encoded is because Firefox gives me that option. So if your browser, if copy and paste is not your preferred way to perform these queries, you're going to have to do URL encodes to the query so that it runs in programming environments like MATLAB. So the answer that I'm getting is, of course, the same thing that the browser was seeing, which is the table with the data. So because sometimes data can contain tabs, that is, or commas, that is not the best way to obtain data that comes from a REST service. So I'm just going to say that my HTML, let's save the variable as a variable called HTML. I already have a function here that converts the HTML to a MATLAB array, which is the most convenient way to handle this type of data in MATLAB. And now if I look at my data, I can start browsing it. So I can ask, for example, for all the lines in the first column,